Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We're here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, human potential, and more with experts from every walk of life. And today, I'll prove that to you for sure. Our goal is to help you become the most remarkable leader and human being you can be. I'm your host, Kevin Eikenberry, and I'm glad you're here. If you like the show, you'll love our free video course, 20 Days to Remarkable Leadership. You can learn more and sign up at remarkablepodcast.com/20 days. That's 20 days. Today, our guest is Maynard Keenan. You may or may not know the guy that you may be seeing right now. Maynard James Keenan is a Grammy award-winning vocalist for the internationally revered music acts of Tool, Perfect Circle, and the multimedia cabaret troupe Puscifer. Keenan is a winemaker and owner of Caduceus Cellars and Merkin Vineyards, owner and founder of the Arizona-based winemakers co-op 4-8 Wineworks, and a founding board member of the Arizona Vignerons Alliance. See, it's eyesight and accent, right? Quality control and wine growers data collection collective. Keenan, 52, was born in Ohio and grew up in West Michigan. He has lived in Arizona since 1995, has 2 children, and runs his multiple businesses with the indispensable help of his wife, Jennifer, and trust me, he needs help. Listen, welcome, Maynard.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Listen, if you've been listening to this show, you're thinking you got a Grammy award-winning artist. First of all, how do you get him, and why is all that? So the backstory here is that this guy and I grew up together. We've got a long history, and when I decided to do a podcast, I wanted to do it broad, and so far we've had a lot of people that you might have recognized, you might have thought of if you've sort of been following me, but I'm so excited to have Maynard with me today. A very early morning in Arizona, so thank you, sir. Glad.
Okay, we're up. It's harvest time, so we're up.
That's exactly. So we're going to talk about the grapes and all that in a bit here. So as I mentioned, and I know Maynard as Jim, so I may slip. So if I do, I apologize. Listen, we grew up together, and before we started, we just were talking very briefly about Western Michigan and that sort of thing. So I'm curious about what you've learned about leadership and about how you've run your businesses from your growing up and sort of from your start. Just talk about that for a second.
Well, I think some of the things that I learned the most in Michigan was just that work ethic. Whether you're going to be a cross-country runner, whether you're going to be a wrestler, whether you're going to be a farmer, or just my dad was a high school teacher, and we couldn't even get to school to do our job without plowing out a quarter mile of snow in the driveway. Yeah. So that was just, normal kid was like, well, there's snow. Let's go to bed and play video games. No, that wasn't enough. That wasn't even. It was just ingrained in me that wasn't even an option. We were up early, cleaning out the driveway, and then making the 4-mile trek to school.
Yeah. Yeah, and you and I talked about that a lot. This sort of that work ethic thing. I think that's great. So, I recently read. It wasn't from you, but I read from someone that leading a band is harder than leading any other kind of team. And I don't know if that's true, but you've got a lot of experience leading bands. And so I'm curious, a lot of people listening would be really curious about that whole part of your life. So what have you learned about leadership in the leading of this disparate groups of folks that you've led in bands?
Well, in general, I think artists are like, it's like herding cats. They've had their moment of discipline where they've actually honed their craft. Not in most cases, but the best of the best have honed a craft in some way, and they've spent some of that discipline. But they tend to be the ones that are the leaders of those projects. So there's some discipline involved. But I think with artists in general, you have a hard time getting them to listen to any direction because we're artists and we have to be free. So it's a difficult thing. You have to do a lot of Pavlovian tactics and dangle some carrots for them to get them to move, or not. I mean, that really is. I absolutely agree with your what you read. It's very, very difficult especially if it's a four-way thing like with the tool.
Right.
Very difficult because four very talented people that think that they know the way the world works, and we're all four very stubborn.
It's not you, surely not.
It's a train wreck, sir.
And yet you all figured out how to navigate it to create a lot of success and create a lot of following and all that stuff. So other than the Pavlovian techniques, any specific, I mean, you've got all that talent. So, I mean, I think that's relevant for us regardless of what we do. Most of us listening here are not leading a band, but we may be leading very talented people who have, a lot of free spirit sort of tendencies. So are there any other pieces to that maybe that have been helpful to you? I don't want to, you have to name names, but is there anything specific that's been helpful?
No, I think two things that have been very effective, which is always dangerous when you're talking about other kind of businesses. But when I'm working with Puscifer, if I'm working with Perfect Circle, those band members see me working. I'm not trying to delegate from a desk and point and grunt and not truly get what it is to have a work day. If you're actually getting your hands dirty figuratively or literally, and then also they see you doing things that they couldn't possibly do. Some people just don't have the personality for a camera. They don't have the personality for an interview. Right. Just putting words together is songs. But if they see your work ethic, they'll jump in. They'll follow you. So I think it is lead by example.
Well, you and I talked about this a few months ago when we were together, and you just mentioned that about your dad. Okay, we're getting out and we're plowing the driveway, right?
Yeah.
Not sending you. We're going to go out and do this together. And you and I had this conversation about my dad and about that whole sort of thing of. I think that leading by example is, in my work, I talk about it all the time with people, and I think that people sort of say, "Oh yeah," but no, that's really it. I mean, it's such a huge part of it. At the end of the day.
It really is.
So I remember, conversations that we had long, long ago when you had hair and mine wasn't gray. And
so we take my hair.
Yeah, it's gone. But I remember growing up, you talking about, you certainly weren't talking about this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in Arizona. I'm going to have wineries. But in many ways, nothing that you've accomplished surprises me, right? And so talk a little bit about the path, because, I mean, if people on this call might say, okay, well, they went to college, they went to this company, and then they started an entrepreneurial company or whatever, and they can sort of see a path. Very different to go from Western Michigan to winning Grammy Awards, right? So just real quickly, sort of talk about how goal setting or your vision has played a role in how you've gotten where you've gotten.
Well, I'm an only child, so a lot of this stuff goes on in my head first, without any kind of interruption or pushback from Paula.
Right. That's my sister, everybody. So.
So a lot of these things happen in my head first. And I think when you bring them out of your head and you actually kind of manifest them in some way, I think with anything, it's psychology 101. When you have some kind of positive reinforcement, even if it's for bad behavior or just actions in general, when you have some positive reinforcement for it, you tend to follow that path a little bit. So those things start to manifest a little bit easier as you go, because you see, you want to be, as a human being, you want to be appreciated, you want to be desired, you want to be, liked. So I think if you're being praised for something that you do maybe better than the person next to you, you tend to follow those paths. So I think, in high school, writing words was my way out. I wasn't a great cross country runner. I wasn't a great wrestler. I wasn't a great student. I was good at most of those things. But the thing that I had was when I see a classmate in a bad situation or you're upset about something, I could sit down and talk to them a little bit and then recede into my room and write a song or a poem or write a poem basically about their thing, and you would get that reinforcement like, oh my God, this is not only specific to my situation, it's beyond, it's broad, and it could actually apply to this other friend that's having a rough day. So there's the foundation of it. It's the reinforcement for having scratched the surface of something.
Cool.
And you just follow it.
And then you follow it, right? And you follow it from there. And so, and I think a lot of people don't follow, right? Maybe not everyone's quite as aware to say, hey, look, I can actually do this, right? So there's some self-image there, and there's some of that stuff there. But I think to your point, a lot of people seem self-evident to you, and I'm guessing to many of the people listening, because people that are listening to this are people who care about their own growth and development or of their teams, right? So at some level, everyone listening thinks about the world differently than a lot of other people do. But so not everyone follows. I mean, to you, that's obvious. Well, I'm going to do that because that worked and that was helpful and that was fun and added value, whatever words you want to put to that. So it made sense to you to follow that. Not everyone does that. I think as leaders, part of what we got to do is help people see that and follow that.
Yeah. And that's probably where I don't do as well as a leader, because I'm always in my head. And so I've been, oddly enough, I just hit send a couple hours ago. I've been trying to more often just talk about what's happening, especially with the winery. Like, what's happening in the winery? I'm just letting everybody in the team know, like, okay, here's what's happening in the winery, here's what's happening in the tasting room, here's what's happening in the actual vineyards, here's what's happening at this other tasting room, here's at the facility, here's the new one we're putting in. And I'm including everybody in these emails so they can hear my thought process about where we were, where we are, those kind of things. So I think that's important to share that out loud. But I think part of what ends up really scaring people the most about following those kind of creative instincts, following those paths, is their disconnect between utilitarian and creative processes. They really are joined at the hip, and there's this idea that why would art have any place in high school? Well, creative processes and creative thinking, just artistic thinking outside the box, are what developed a bow and arrow and saved our asses back when we were living in caves. Those kind of thought process are what got us out of loincloths and got us to the moon.
We could argue whether it's better, but that's a whole other conversation. But no, right. But I think that's exactly right. And I think that people do want to segment that or compartmentalize that, which is really where I wanted to go next. So what do people would look at you, whether they knew you, whether they're here because listening to this podcast because of you, which there will be some, right? Because they're fans of yours. And there will be people listening right now that maybe didn't know who you were, right? Shocking, I know. But the people that won't, because they're, that's not their, but regardless of that, they can now recognize, hey, this is a guy who's creative. This is a guy who's done a lot of creative stuff in the classical terms, to your point, right? Not the utilitarian.
Right. Right.
Everyone would think of creativity, would think of music, they would think of writing, they would think of those, okay, that's creative. So what do you do to spur that in yourself? I mean, I'm sure there have been ebbs and flows and seasons in your life, but like, what is it that you do to keep, I don't know if you want to call it, keep that edge or spur that in yourself? Like, give us a glimpse into that for us who maybe don't think about the world the way you do.
I haven't actually had a near-death experience. But I think I've been around people who've had a near-death experience. Mm-hmm. I think that's, as odd as that is to say, I think some people are jolted. You always hear the story of like the person who's going along their life and something crazy happens, and then all of a sudden they, something happens with them, and they're like embracing life and taking it by the balls and just going for it.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times it ends up being that you have to see what possibly couldn't be. So for me, I think I had that early on several occasions, and I think I always think that you have to, or the Puscifer motto is "Life is short. Create something with every single breath you draw." So I think if you could just take a minute, sit down, and realize that you only have so much time here. Why not just go for it? Why not just do something? You're a creative, intelligent, resilient creature. The worst that can happen is you have to start over. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where you were before, right? So
right. So start over. Go for it.
So
try to bring people along with you and arm them with the tools to help pick you up when you fall down while they're still walking.
So you were talking about the model for Puscifer, and I've had the good fortune to see two tours of that. And you in the intro that you gave me, you call it a musical cabaret, which I think is a really great way to describe what it is. And you and I have talked about the business model of why have an opening act, why not make it one big experience and all that stuff. But talk about how, for people that haven't seen that or know what that is, just give people a flavor of that multimedia experience, and sort of how did you get to, very specifically, how did you get to that idea, if you can recall, from just being being a rock band to creating this true cabaret with a different in a different genre of music than anyone would ever think about in that regard?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. Well, I think just growing up in the era that we did, the Sonny and Cher show, Hollywood Squares, Hee Haw, all those kind of variety shows. If you look back at some of the Fred Astaire's, they're multi-talented people. They're not just actors. They're not just singers. They're also dancers. They play music. They play
right.
instruments. They have other interests, and they're just because they're creative people that are also working hard, utilitarian at their arts, plural. So I think that kind of stuck with me, that early kind of hee-haw, Sonny and Cher experiences, watching those on the boob tube. And I felt like being in a band, it felt in a lot of ways it's very one-dimensional. Can be all about hero worship, when no disrespect to Shakira, but it's all about Shakira and her diet or whatever's going on with the show of her. Just it feels so. The audience is here, and you're up there being worshipped. It's a very strange dynamic for me. So it makes more sense when you put it almost in terms of a film, where the audience has lost who's actually on the screen. They're more engaged in the story, and you all get a little bit of, if you want an escapism, that's fine. If you want to be inspired to go out and do something because of what you've witnessed, that's better. Yeah. So I feel like that's the dynamic I tend to go with Puscifer, is to take you out of your element, still impress you with a show, but it's not about the individuals in the show. It's about the whole piece. And it's comedic, it's musical, it's visual, it's all those things.
Unexpected, it's unconventional, right. It's fun, it's all that stuff, right? So most definitely keep coming to Indianapolis, or I'm going to have to travel wherever the heck you go. Right. So we talked about this whole musical thing, and then you mentioned wine, mentioned it a couple times. So why wine? Like what?
Yeah, I think just in general, growing something is grounding. Just figuratively growing something and literally growing something, it can be grounding, but I feel like the literal part is more grounding. So looking at the area around my home, I noticed that it had many of the wonderful similarities to some of the best growing regions in the world, but there were no vines there, and it made me scratch my head. But I went ahead and just started planting vines anyway. There's a couple people that were planting vines already. I had vines in the ground, and then I finally did the research and realized that this area was a booming wine region around the mining days, 1900, when the owners of all the land rights and all the water rights and land holdings, they had to find a backup industry, and vines were what their consultants told them, but Prohibition made them pull them all out. Otherwise, they would be here already. So again, one of those aha moments when the magic happens and you have made a decision and in some way were praised for having rediscovered that. And it's just a self-discovery. It's a self-praise at that point. You're patting yourself on the back going, I saw potential. I started to pursue that potential. I found out that somebody else had pursued it, and the only thing that ruined their momentum was Prohibition. So I feel like the winery is an absolutely all of those moving parts of what I mentioned before, utilitarian and artistic. You have to be on your toes. You have to be conscious. You have to be present. And I get to stay home.
Yeah, there you go. Which in your business, kind of like mine, although more so for you, kind of nice to be home, right? Kind of nice to be home. Yeah. So other than all of the work that you do, and let's make no mistake, all the stuff we've talked about is work. I mean, you like it, I know, but it's work. And I know we talked about what you're going to do in the vineyard today. It's going to be work. What do you do for fun beyond the passions that you have in your vocations?
Well, I think that's the I think music became a job in a strange way, and I feel like now the music is now my fun, because I do work hard in the cellar and I do enjoy the wines, the winemaking and pouring it for people who are doubters for Arizona and what we're doing here. That's always fun, but as far as the recreation, now it's actually the music has become. I'm back to the music being the fun part, so I enjoy doing it. There was quite a while I wasn't sure that I enjoyed doing it anymore because it just felt disconnected. It didn't feel like the magic was there. So I've recovered the magic.
What more could any of us ask for, right, than that?
Right.
So there's Maynard. There's a question that I ask every guest that I have, and I did not prep you for this, so we'll go. Yeah, exactly. So I have a habit of when I meet smart people, interesting people, I like to ask them what they're reading. And I know not everyone's a huge reader. And I'm just curious, is there anything that you've read recently? It doesn't matter what the genre, anything that you'd share that you thought was interesting, you enjoyed, that people might find useful?
Well, I was actually, to be honest, the last time I was reading was a couple Cliff Notes, but
nothing wrong with that.
But I was rereading some of the earlier Joseph Campbell releases, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and Myths to Live By. I was kind of going through some of those books recently, just to recall what it was that inspired me about those books. That was the most recent stuff that I was kind of diving into. There's a couple things on the laying around on the tables that are more travel, kind of Anthony Bourdain style books of travels. But those, I just kind of browse those. The Joseph Campbell Myths to Live By, I went back and read recently.
I think that raises a great point, is that I think a lot of people, well, I read that. Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with reading something again. And it's like, I know lots of people that watch movies more than once. And if you watch the movie the second time, often you get a very different experience from it the second time. Same movie, same person, kind of. But right. I think that I have had people say to me, almost like you kind of did, well, I went back and reread, almost sort of apologetic. And I think you weren't really, but you hear what I'm saying. And I think that people, we shouldn't worry about that at all. I mean, if there's something that struck you or that, you're in a different stage of life, I think that's a great thing to do. I think people miss that a lot of times because they want to, well, I need to read that one, why not listen to that old Kiss album again, right?
Right. Well, you got to figure, Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell, is about that hero's journey. And that journey, everyone has a different everyone witnesses and sees and appreciates different parts of that journey depending on where they are in their life, because it is about a life journey.
Yeah.
Odysseus, the Iliad and the Odyssey, those are, if you read those every 2 years, you're gonna read different parts because you're a different person.
Exactly. I completely agree. So you got lots of stuff that you do. An email from you has like 34 websites. Nothing wrong with that. But like, if people maybe didn't know you, or they want to know more about you, and I know you've got a book coming out. So where can people learn more? A couple places people could go.
The easiest, but fairly inaccurate place to go would be Maynard James Keenan on Wikipedia. Yep. There's a nice big broad stroke of stuff there that could give you a shotgun approach of a lot of inaccurate information. It's accurate enough, basically.
It's not like Mason County Central Library when we went in and looked in actual encyclopedias. Now it's this thing called Wikipedia, right?
My favorite, it's Sarah Jensen is the person who wrote my biography, and she's 10 years older than me. She's from Mason County. My best friend is her brother, Kurt. She has the moment that she just gets giddy when she shares it with me. She was back in Mason County. This is Mason County for me. She's back in Mason County. She's writing for the paper. George Wilson Sr.
Yeah.
Right. She's telling George, Maynard, he just won another Grammy. That's like, it's for musicians, that's winning an Oscar.
Yeah, exactly.
And he won a Grammy. And George, it's Mason County, small town that doesn't have all the Wikipedia information at all. George sitting there quietly, and he goes, his dad was the best wrestling coach we ever had in that high school. Like, he couldn't process Grammy. He couldn't process all the other stuff that was outside of the county.
He had to go back.
His dad was the best wrestling coach our high school ever saw. And there's like Grammy.
Maybe I need to go on Wikipedia and add that in.
Yeah.
Maynard's dad was the best.
God bless George. Rest his soul.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, Maynard, Jim, friend, it was a pleasure to have you on. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And I close all of these for our listeners with the question of now what. The two-word question that you ought to think about now that you've been entertained and hopefully enjoyed our conversation. What are you going to do with it? What action might you take? What insight can you learn from, whether it's to go learn more about Maynard's wine, or whether it's to think more about your own creative path, or whether it's to think about how you nurture the creativity of your team? There's plenty here beyond entertainment value, hopefully, for people to take. And I hope that you do, to ask that question, now what? What am I going to do with this? And so, Maynard, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you, as always, and everyone. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, make sure you subscribe now so you can get all the future episodes. I'd love for you to rate and review this episode. And when you do, we'll thank you for your honest appraisal with a free gift. Go to remarkablepodcast.com/leave-review-win. That's it. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Maynard, have a great day. Enjoy the grapes. We'll talk to everybody again soon. Thanks.
Thank you.